Pagans and Gods. One, escape. The walls of reality dissolved to nothing. I stood on the precipice of oblivion as the moments dripped away like water. The surreal ambiance of the air entered my lungs. I'd found myself floating in midair as if I were a spirit. The apple that I'd so coveted turned to dust and blew away in the fresh wind. I was in an unknown state, drifting in space. My world had dissipated from the physical, becoming something else entirely. For me, reality had been born anew.
The choice you make now will lead you on a path of creation or a path to destruction,
said a womanly whisper. I couldn't speak, and I was visionless in the darkness of this void. All I could do was listen, and listen well I would.
You believe the human condition is derived from faith in unseen gods and their revelations to man as opposed to rational thought and intellectual curiosity. The gods that you seek do not require your faith in them, but faith in yourself. The day you embrace that faith will be the day you'll transcend your worldly existence, where two will become three,
the voice said. A blinding light slew the darkness. It seemed as if I were in the core of a star, yet there was no heat or fusion, only a peaceful brightness that calmed my entire being.
You mustn't see the courting bloodline as a faith-based concept, Naya. What is nothing more. Legends, myths, and superstitions are notions that don't apply in your world. Reality is far more intriguing,
the voice continued. A tingling sensation overwhelmed my body when I recognized to whom the voice belonged. It was Eve. She was guiding me. I blinked and found myself back in the cell with the snake, my teeth almost cutting into the skin of the apple. The Lord of Destruction hovered in midair, smiling. I gazed at the snake, utterly disgusted. He had a devious little grin on his face. It was then I realized that the price he required of me was too steep. I refused to become like the every entity that I'd fought so hard against just for the sake of vengeance. Death would only beget more death. Destroying the world was not the way to liberation. I took the apple out of my mouth and dropped it to the floor. To my horror, the moment the apple hit the ground, it turned into a pile of black slime covered in maggots. Apep hissed, slapping me in the face with his reptilian tongue. "You weak, pathetic human!" he roared. My heart dropped. The tone of his voice terrified me beyond words. "You will show your true nature soon enough. Someday you'll prove that you belong in the Underverse like so many others before you. You are not the one. Do you hear me? You're not the one." A shining green light burst from the center of his serpent body, forcing me to cover my eyes with my arms. I crouched on the ground and shielded my head from the black mist that began to fill the room. Everything around me shook violently. This damned snake was going to kill me for refusing his offer. "There will be other opportunities. And I'll be waiting, you wretched little girl," Apep bellowed. Within moments, he'd vanished. The mist cleared and the floor stopped trembling. I waited for about a minute before I uncovered my face to be certain that snake was gone for good. The room had returned to normal. There was no trace of Apep or that apple. I sighed exuberantly. What just happened couldn't be blamed on my imagination or some malnourishment-induced hallucination. Apep was real, and he was after me. Upon laying my eyes on that creature, I'd known my reality would never be the same again. It was crucial that I return to the Blue Forest to meet with Eve. She brought me back from making a terrible mistake. Despite that horrific experience, I was glad for one thing. Apep had released me from my bondage, and I was able to move around freely. Somehow, I had to get out of here.
This little courting cunt almost got me killed last night. I can't wait for the war slayers to dissect her,"
said a familiar voice. It was the guard who captured me and brought me to this desolate place. He was right outside the door talking to someone. Fuck! They were coming for me.
"Do you have the keys? I want a word with the cunt before Nocturna intelligence gets here,"
he said.
"Give me the keys. I think I'm entitled to a little taste for bringing her back here," he said.
"Cephtus gave clear instruction that she's not to be touched. She must be pure for the procedure,"
said the person the guard was conversing with.
"I won't tell if you won't."
Beads of sweat dripped from my brow. I recalled what this deviant said to Dae-Jin and me when we fell from that cliff last night. I damned sure wasn't going to stand by and wait for him to come in here and rape me. I had to make do with what was available. Brushing my disgust aside, I picked up a decaying leg bone from the floor and stood beside the door waiting for them to enter.
"Look, I'm not going to be a party to this. You want to go in there, then fine, take the keys. If Cephtus finds you in there, you know what he'll do,"
said the other guard. I heard the keys being tossed.
"If you want to be a little bitch, then leave. I'll have her all to myself,"
said the deviant. The other guard scoffed.
"You never saw me. If Cephtus catches you and asks you how you got the keys, I'll say you stole them from me."
"Whatever. Coward. Get out of here. I have something sweet to taste,"
the guard whispered. I listened as the footsteps of one of them faded. As the doorknob jiggled, I could hear the guard's repulsive chuckle on the other side of the door. I held the bone high into the air, preparing to strike. He opened the entrance slowly, popping his head in with a sadistic grin.
"Courting cunt? Where are you? We have some unfinished business."
He turned his head to the right, locking eyes with me. Within seconds, I brought down the bone, breaking it across his face.
"Ah, you bitch!"
he shouted, falling to the floor. I took the keys from the door, shoved them into my pocket, and hit him in the gut with the small piece of bone I had left in my hand. He curled into a ball as I continued my assault.
"You vulgar, disgusting piece of shit!"
I screamed, kicking him in the face and thrashing him with my weapon. The bone began to snap into pieces with each blow. Soon there was only a tiny bit of it left in my hand. The guard lay on the floor with a bloodied face, moaning in pain. I knelt and grabbed the back of his head.
"Where's Dae-Jin?"
I asked fiercely. He gazed at me with the same stupid grin on his face.
"Fuck you, cunt!"
He spat a mixture of blood and saliva in my face and laughed. I stared at the weapon in my hand, blood boiling with rage.
"Dae-Jin is fucked, just like you,"
he continued with his laughter. Fisting the splintered piece of bone, I lifted it into the air and brought it down full force, stabbing him in the knee.
"Ah!"
he screamed. I quickly covered his mouth so as not to bring unwanted attention.
"Shut up! Shut up!"
I whispered into his ear sharply. He panted with watery eyes. It seemed as if the confident, cocky persona he displayed had finally melted away. I grabbed his head tighter. "Now, how about we try this again? Tell me where they're keeping Dae-Jin."
He's in solitary, the same place he's always been secluded to,"
he whimpered. I knew exactly where that was. Dae-Jin's room wasn't that far away. I just hoped this place wasn't as heavily guarded as it had been before. The last thing I needed was to be captured again. I gazed into the eyes of the fiend as tears ran down his face. "Remember this moment the next time you call me a cunt." He continued to snivel. After releasing him, I jumped to my feet, ran out the door, and locked the deviant inside. I surveyed from right to left to ensure the coast was clear. Luckily, the hallway was empty. Once I found Dae-Jin, I'd leave this place of suffering forever. All the kind-hearted, warm feelings and memories I had of the Prime Temple were gone. Reality had lifted the veil of sweetness. I'd finally come to know the abominable darkness that consumed this so-called temple of love and peace. Slowly, I tiptoed down the hall toward the stairs that led to Dae-jin's accommodations. It was a bit surprising the High Priestess hadn't had Dae-jin tortured for helping me escape. Maybe being the twin brother to that murdering lunatic Seftis was the reason they'd shown him mercy. Then again, he could be in his dorm chained to the wall, unable to move just as I had been. I'd find out soon. The quicker I got to him and snuck us out of this horrid place, the better.
"I'll personally skin you alive if he touched her!"
Seftis screamed from the opposite end of the hall. My heart damn near dropped into my stomach the second I heard his voice. The moment those bastards stepped into that cell and saw the guard I'd left bloodied, they'd come searching for me frantically. I fast-stepped down the stairs with purpose. It would only be a matter of time before these halls were packed with guards. I jumped down the rest of the steps and landed on Dae-jin's floor. The sense of feces and rot hit my nose like a tidal wave. The reason we weren't allowed down here was apparent. This level smelled of death itself. I began searching feverishly for the room Dae-jin was being kept in. Since this floor was on one of the temple's lower levels, we could make our escape through a window the same way we had before. The only problem was I didn't see any windows down here. Everything was made of stone and metal. The only light was from the torches and fluorescent lights on the ceiling. Why they had torches on the walls baffled me. Perhaps it was to make this place appear even more sinister than it already did.
You fucking idiots! Your skin belongs to me!
Screamed Seftis in a murderous rage. The fact that I could hear him from down here terrified me. There was no time left. I had to find Dae-jin, and fast. I hopped from room to room, checking through the square hole in each wooden door. Dae-jin had to be in one of these rooms. Those who managed this place were truly sadistic. This entire floor was more akin to a chamber of torment than living quarters. With each room I peeked into, there was nothing but the sight of grotesque suffering. It was beyond disgusting. These people were living in their own filth, most covered in blood from beatings. They also appeared malnourished, as most were skin and bones. I'd never seen anything like it. I had to keep myself from vomiting as I continued my search.
"She couldn't have gotten far. Search every corner, every room, every microbe of this place. Find her!"
shouted Seftis. His voice was much closer than before. I was all but screwed if they came marching down those steps. There was nowhere to hide down here except for one of these rooms. With purpose, I continued my search, door to door. As I looked inside each room, a thought occurred to me. That damned guard could have been lying about Dae-jin being down here. If that were the case, I was done for. That piece of shit led me right into a corner as if I were a morphling bear trapped by a pack of dagger wolves. The only thing I could do was hope he'd told me the truth. I was near the end of the corridor with only a few rooms left to check. My worst fears seemed to be coming true. Hope diminished the closer I got to the last room in this hall.
That courting bitch is probably on the dungeon floor. No doubt she's looking for that traitor Dae-jin. Get down there and look!
I heard the High Priestess yell from upstairs. It lifted my spirits that she'd just confirmed Dae-jin was down here. However, that didn't matter because I would be all but fucked in a few minutes. There was no point in trying to be subtle any longer. I hastened to each door, screaming his name. Dae-jin! Dae-jin! Where are you? With their minds slipping in and out of reality, all the poor souls locked in their private chambers began mimicking my cries. Dae-jin! 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 They shouted, reaching out of the small square holes in their doors.
"Naya,"
said someone from the last door down the hall. With lightning speed, I raced toward the door and gazed inside. There sat Dae-jin, chained to the floor like an animal, body covered in bruises. Dae-jin! I exclaimed. Both relief and sadness filled my heart. What had they done to him? He gazed up at me with anguish written all over his face. I kicked the door repeatedly as hard as I could. I had to get it open.
"Naya, why did you come back for me? Get out of here! Go now!"
he said with what little energy he could muster. "No, I'm not leaving you here to die," I shouted between kicks. Slowly, the wood began to crack with each one of my blows. "Dae-jin! Dae-jin!" The other prisoners kept chanting in monotone, ghostly pitches. They'd been driven insane by the constant torture. I damned sure wasn't going to leave Dae-jin here to become like them. With one last strike, I broke the lock and the door flew open. I hurried inside, crouched next to him and hugged him tightly.
Listen to me, Naya. You have to get out of here. I'm finished. Forget about me. Just get as far away from this hell as you can, he said.
"I'm not leaving you here. You helped me escape once. Now it's my turn," I said.
Get out of here!
He pushed me off with his shoulder, which forced me to fall to the floor. "Damn it, Dae-jin! I can't do this without you!" I cried.
You're going to have to find a way. Look at me. These chains have sealed my fate. I can't escape, but you can. Just go,
he said with teary, bloodshot eyes. "There has to be a way to get you free." I examined the cuffs around his wrist to see if there was a weakness we could exploit.
There is no way to get these chains off. You have to leave before they get here. If they come down here, while you're in this dungeon, you'll have nowhere to run.
I cupped his jaw in my palms and gazed into his tormented eyes. "Don't give up on me, Dae-jin. You're a guardian. Guardians never give up, no matter the odds. Now think, how can we get these damn chains off you?" As I looked around for a tool, a rock, or anything we could use to free him, his eyes suddenly lit up.
There is a way, but I need your help to do it, he said.
"What? Tell me." He exhaled slowly.
Press the thumb on my right hand inward until you hear a crack. Do it fast and do it hard.
His voice was stern. I looked down at his hand and suddenly realized what he wanted me to do. "Dae-jin, I can't."
You must, or we're both going to die here, he shouted.
With his arms spread so far apart, bound to the floor, he was unable to do it himself. There was no other choice. I'd have to dislocate his thumbs so he could slide his hands out of the cuffs. As I began to press on his right hand, the sounds of footsteps filling the room resonated from down the hall. The prisoner's screams fell to whispers, allowing me to hear the guards slowly approaching.
"Yeah, she's down here. I can smell the bitch,"
one of them said.
"Do it, now,"
said Dae-jin through clenched teeth.
Naya, Naya, come out and play, you courting whore,
said one of the guards. My palms were sweaty, my nerves were wrecked, and with each insult these people threw at me, my patience shortened.
"Have you found her?"
said Cephas from farther down the hall. Bewilderment showed on Dae-jin's face. I gazed at him briefly before pressing down on his thumb as hard as I could. The bone in his hand snapped out of place, causing me to jump back a bit. The sound of it was unsettling. Dae-jin took the pain in stride while slowly pulling his hand out of the cuff. He popped his thumb back into place once he was free inside.
"Go directly to Dae-jin's cell, you idiots! Why are you wasting time checking each one?" ordered Cephas.
Dae-jin and I stared at each other. We knew right then we were screwed.
"Oh, yes. The smell of her is getting stronger. She's definitely in there," said the guard.
Their footsteps grew closer and closer. Neither of us had any weapons with which to defend ourselves. The dagger wolves were approaching, and we were the morphling bears waiting to be devoured. Dae-jin popped his other thumb out of its socket to free his left hand. I gathered a piece of wood from the splintered door and tossed it to Dae-jin. Standing off to the side of the door, I waited for the guard to reveal himself. I'd have to use my hands in this fight. There were no other options.
"Get out here, bitch. There's nowhere for you to run,"
said the guard. We stood silent, waiting for the inevitable fight for survival that would ensue. After Dae-jin freed himself from the chains, he hopped in front of me with the piece of wood, readying to strike the guard the second he came into view. With his laser cannon pointed straight in front of him, the guard crept into the room cautiously, using his weapon as a guide. Dae-jin raised the sharp piece of wood above the guard's head, readying to strike.
"Get down! Dust bomb! 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 Ah!
Screamed Septis. The guard turned around swiftly, only to be stabbed in the shoulder by Daejin. The guard fell to the floor, dropping his weapon and howling in pain. Daejin clutched my waist, threw me to the ground, and jumped on top of me. It all happened so fast.
Close your eyes and hold your breath,
he shouted. I did as he said without protest. A flash of light that almost burned through my closed eyelids exploded all around us. The entire floor shook. Even though I was holding my breath, dust particles still found their way inside my nose and mouth. My ears rang from the noise of the detonation. I was grateful Daejin protected me from the brunt of the blast. If I was suffering this much, I could only imagine how he felt. I just hoped he was all right.
This is a bad idea, General Roslow. The Supreme Sovereign himself will come down on us like a force of nature after this, said a faint voice. It can't be helped. We have to save the courting bloodline no matter the cost.
If you hadn't let her loose in the Blue Forest, this wouldn't even be necessary.
That last voice was familiar. There was no doubt in my mind that it was Commander Sarsha. The Resistance. They were here.
It looks like that murderer Septis blasted a hole in the wall and fled, said one of the rebels. From this high up? Well, I hope he leaped to his death, said Sarsha.
You three, check each room quickly. If there was one place they'd keep her, it would be here, said the general.
Yes, sir. I'll start on the far end, said a woman. I opened my eyes and saw the guard Daejin had stabbed. The blast had burned his body black. My heart palpitated the moment I saw it. Daejin was still on top of me, but he wasn't moving. Eyeing the cuts and bruises all over his body, I began to think the worst. If that dust was toxic, then it was already in his system. General, Commander, I found her. She's down here, said the woman. Daejin, are you okay? I whispered. He didn't respond. I wasn't even sure he was breathing. 3 members of the Resistance entered the room and pulled Daejin's limp body off of me, then tossed him to the floor beside the burned guard.
It's all right, Naya. You're safe. We've come to get you out of here, said one of the women.
Her face was painted blue with the symbol of a moon drawn on the center of her forehead. She helped me to my feet.
Come this way, she said.
Wait! Don't leave him! I cried out.
Who are you talking about? She asked.
Him! I pointed to Daejin, who suddenly gasped for breath. My heart jumped the moment he opened his mouth. Thank the gods he was still alive.
Of course. Anything you wish, Naya, she said.
The other 2 women knelt and lifted Daejin to his feet. We staggered out of the cell down the hall and toward the steps. I raised my head and saw Sarsha standing with a glowing electrified lance in one hand and a small laser cannon in the other. She had the look of a warrior. Words couldn't describe the joy I felt at that moment. She deactivated her lance, put away her cannon, and approached me. With her index finger, she brushed my chin softly.
Looks like you've been through hell, she said with a smile.
I couldn't return the gesture. My face felt as if it were on fire, as did the rest of my body. She moved the hair out of my face so she could get a better look at me. Nodding, she gazed at me with serious eyes.
Now do you believe me?
Two, a mother's sacrifice. I awoke in a subterranean cave made of translucent blue stone. Towering hollowed walls illuminated the darkness, solidifying the beauty surrounding me. The water that flowed out of this corridor settled into a small pool in the distance. I felt as if I were submerged in ethereal splendor. A crowd hovered over me. Men, women, and small children stared at me. Slowly, I opened my eyes fully and sat upright. A bowl of boiled fish coupled with a fresh batch of swanberries sat right by my side. The food gave off a scent that made my stomach growl for nourishment. A black nightgown had replaced my filth-covered clothes, and my skin had also been washed clean. It appeared they'd bathed and clothed me while I was sleeping. Commander, she's awake! Exclaimed one of the children. The crowd parted to make room for her.
Naya, everything's all right. You're safe now, said Sarsha. She took a piece of fish and placed a swanberry on top of it. You need to eat. Here, take this. I accepted the food and gazed down at my feet. Tears formed in my eyes. An outpouring of emotion was about to erupt from me. All that I'd done to survive up until this point had me questioning my sanity. I'd grown up so pure, so peaceful. But within the span of a few days, I'd beaten and stabbed a man, killed a dagger wolf, and confronted the beast known as Apep. This wasn't my reality. It couldn't be. I dropped the fish to the ground. No longer could I hold back the tears. I covered my face with my hands and cried uncontrollably. Sarsha hugged me tightly while rubbing my back. Everyone, please give us a minute, she said. I wrapped my arms around her, returning her affection. It'll be all right, Naya. Sorry I was so hard on you the last time we met. I was so focused on our mission. I didn't stop to consider how all this would affect you. General Roslow shouldn't have let you go the way he did. You weren't ready for the Blue Forest. Pulling away, I wiped my eyes, sniffing. I needed to regain my bearings. Sarsha, you really are my aunt, aren't you? She moved my hair from my eyes. Yes, Naya, I am. We're the last of the courting bloodline. Then tell me what happened to my mother. How did I end up in the temple in the first place? When I was being held captive, I was told my mother killed the mate of the High Priestess. I want to know the truth. Tell me everything, from start to finish, I demanded. Don't you think you should eat first? I can only imagine what those bastards did to you. She handed me another piece of fish. I placed it in my mouth, and it was delicious. Upon tasting it, I realized just how hungry I was. I took a handful of swanberries and ate them one by one. They were so refreshing. The man who was with you, he's Cephtus, isn't he? We thought he'd jumped out a small hole he made in the wall back at your temple. You wouldn't believe our shock when we found him there with you. I almost choked on my food. No, that's not Cephtus. He's Cephtus's brother, Dajan. The night I was captured in the Blue Forest, he helped me escape the temple before those guards came. He saved my life. Wait, what? You mean to tell me that Orion Tyr had 2 sons? She gazed at me, dumbfounded. I could only assume that this Orion she mentioned was Dajan's father. Dajan told me his father was working with the Resistance. That's what got him killed. We knew Orion had a son who was called Cephtus. Orion showed us images of him long ago and told us to avoid him at all costs. He never mentioned anything about a second son. Where's Dajan now? I asked anxiously. If they believed him to be Cephtus, then there was no telling what they were going to do to him. He's with General Roslow. They're interrogating him, she said. I jumped up so fast I almost knocked over the bowl of food. I could hear screams echoing in the distance, but I'd paid them no mind until now. Where are they? I hurried toward the commotion down the burrow of the cave's darkest corner. Naya, wait! Shouted Sarsha. My light jog turned into a full-speed run. Fire lit the way down the tunnel. Dajan! I screamed. Sarsha was right behind me. The tunnel soon came to a dead end, but I could still hear voices just beyond the stones. It was so dark that I could barely see in front of myself. Sarsha approached with a flashlight, which enabled me to see around the corner that led to a closed-off area shielded with black cloth.
How many people have you killed, Cephtus? Hundreds? Thousands? Millions?
Shouted the general. The sounds of whips and screams followed his every word.
For the last time, I'm not... Ah!
Bellowed Dajan in pain. With as much force as I could garner, I ripped the cloth from the stones and bolted into the room. Dajan's limbs were chained to opposing walls, his body spread wide, fully nude. I damn near fainted when I saw him. Stop it! He's not Cephas! I screamed as loud as I could. General Roslow had a blood-stained whip in his hands with murderous rage in his eyes. "Release him, immediately!" ordered Sarsha. The same women who'd helped us out of the temple rushed to Daejin's side to unchain him.
"This man is my prisoner. What authority do you have to challenge my command?"
said Roslow. "The fact that he's not Cephas! He saved my life! You will let him go!" I demanded. The women unshackled him. Bloodied, with no energy left, Daejin fell to the ground violently. I ran to his side to give comfort. First, the temple beat him, and now the resistance. This man had been through so much torment these last few days. I was unsure of just how much more he could endure. Lash marks covered his body, and he was barely breathing. "What the hell is wrong with you?" I yelled at the general tearfully. He handed his whip to one of the women.
"Cephas is responsible for the deaths of—"
"He's not Cephas! For the love of the gods!" I exclaimed. My body began to emanate a translucent blue glow. I could feel it. The same power that had come from me when I faced that daggerwolf was starting to consume me again.
"Naya, calm down. Just breathe. Close your eyes and concentrate,"
said Sarsha. I gazed at Daejin once more. His eyes were bloodshot. The lashes from the general's whip had reopened most of the wounds he'd taken from the temple's torture. The more rage I felt, the more intense the power within me grew.
"Naya, please, focus your emotions. The more fear and anger you feel, the more uncontrollable your power will become. Listen to my voice. Think of a time when you experienced pure joy,"
said Sarsha. As Daejin lay in my arms, almost lifeless, I closed my eyes and tried to calm myself. If I let my power explode the same way it had before, I might end up killing every man, woman, and child in this cave. I did as Sarsha asked, closed my eyes, and breathed in and out, slowly. This power wasn't going to consume me. I had to get a handle on myself.
"It's true? She's the one? The last of the courting bloodline?"
stuttered the general. I felt myself calming. My aura was fading. "That's it, Naya. Let it flow through you. You're in complete control," said Sarsha. I was suddenly drained. My body slumped on top of Daejin as the blue light surrounding me dissipated.
"Get her some water, quickly!"
shouted Sarsha. The feeling in my chest was heavy, and despite his wounds, Daejin wrapped his arms around me, holding me close.
"It'll be all right, Naya. I've been through much worse,"
he whispered. I couldn't believe how resilient he was. All the torment, abuse, and suffering he'd been through, and this man still found it in him to give me comfort and reassurance. Daejin's strong arms around me soon lost their grip, falling away. I gazed at his face to see that his eyes had closed. He'd lost consciousness, though he was still breathing. Sarsha presented me with a cup full of water.
"Here, Naya, take this. That energy demands a heavy toll on the body."
I sat upright and took the cup from her.
"This man needs medical attention. Please take him to the medic's ward," she said.
The female guards approached us and hoisted Daejin onto their shoulders.
"I'm afraid he's going to need your help if he's going to survive."
I finished the water, then dropped the cup to the floor and gazed at her, perplexed. "What do you mean, if?" I asked.
"Our medical supplies are limited. Despite one of the best physicians within the Cantoon Temple defecting, I'm not sure we'll be able to heal Daejin's wounds with the few medicines we have," she continued. I stood with rage boiling in my gut. General Roslow stared at me as I marched toward him, the blue aura radiating from me once again.
"If he dies, so will you," I threatened. He backed away with his hands in the air.
"How was I supposed to know Cephas had a brother that looked just like him?"
he said, as if that would justify what he'd done. I asked you all to bring him here with us. What reason would I have to ask you to bring the man responsible for my torture? He told you several times that he wasn't Cephas, yet you continued to beat him. Not only that, but you let me loose in that damned blue forest. Dagger wolves almost ate me. A tree tried to strangle me, and guardians from the Prime Temple captured me. If it weren't for you, Daejin would have never been tortured in the first place. He'd still be in solitary.
You mean he'd still be a prisoner?
The general countered. I squinted. What are you trying to say?
I'm saying that if it weren't for me, Daejin would still be a slave to Nocturnus, as would you. If it weren't for us, some war slayer would have harvested you on the day of your ritual. While you were in the Blue Forest, were dagger wolves and killer trees the only creatures you saw, or was there something more? Did you see her?
See who?
The goddess of the Blue Forest, girl. Don't play stupid, exclaimed the general. General Roslow, I think she's been interrogated enough for one day, said Sarsha. Commander, we are running out of time. When we raided the Prime Temple to save her, we might as well have put a target on all of our backs. They'll want retribution, and they'll want it in blood. Blood will flow whether we raided their temple or not. All that matters is Naya. Without her, we are lost, said Sarsha. I know that, but we're safe for the time being. Let them rest, eat, and do whatever they must to get their strength back. That man you tortured needs Naya right now. I'm sure he'll tell you anything you want to know once he's healed. For now, leave them be. Roslow gazed at me and sighed heavily. Fine. Just know, Naya courting, millions of people around the world depend on you. He grunted before storming out. I still hadn't fully grasped my place in all this, but of one thing I was sure. I was going to kick that general's ass someday. Sorry about that. Since we attacked the Prime Temple, he's been a bit on edge. We've never directly challenged the authority of Nocturnus out in the open. The only person crazy enough to do something like that was your mother, said Sarsha. Trust me when I say that I'm truly grateful for your help. If you all hadn't showed up, Daejin and I would be dead. With that said, I need to know where I stand in all this. You aren't planning to use me as a pawn in your war, are you? She laughed. A pawn? Don't be silly. If this were a game, you'd be the goddess watching the players play. And, by the way, this isn't just our war, Naya. It's yours as well. Your mother fought to keep you alive, so you could continue her work. But we can talk about this later. Right now, Daejin needs you. She grabbed my hand to take me to see Daejin in the medics ward, but I paused. There was something I needed to know. Wait, I said. She gazed at me. What's wrong? You told me that you were my aunt, but when I was at the temple, Cephas said he killed both my mother and aunt 10 years ago. She shook her head, and I saw her eyes were beginning to water. It was your mother's plan. She wanted to save you and your father. Are you sure you want to hear this? She asked. I nodded. The woman who raised you, Maunia Nguyen, killed your father, Naya. His name was Akio. He was the General Supreme of the Blue Rights Resistance to the East. Your mother, Tao Courting, was the leader of our resistance here in the West. In the aftermath of a bombing raid that decimated the Blue Rights, your mother defied the advice of our generals and journeyed to the East to ensure Akio had survived. You weren't even a year old when it happened, which is why you may not have any memory of it. Both camps thought you would be safer under the care of your father. I guess in retrospect that was a mistake. I was dumbfounded. I had no memory of any of that. My first memories were of the temple.
and I couldn't recall anything beyond my years under the care of the High Priestess. Did my father survive the bombing?
Yes, he did. His resistance received intel from Orion Tyr that Nocturna intelligence had found their location and sent a war slayer to destroy them. Orion saved hundreds of lives that day. When the dust settled, a legion of guardians and genocide soldiers blanketed the rebel camp like a plague.
Genocide?
Yes, they're trained killers tasked with ethnic cleansing on massive scales. By the time your mother and I got there, the war slayer in command had the place surrounded. There was nothing but dirt, rubble, and hundreds of those murdering bastards scouring the area looking for Akio. We watched from afar as they turned over every rock, shifted through every speck of dirt looking for him. There was a young genocide, 5 or 6 years old at the most, who found Akio hiding in a daggerwolf hole with you in his arms.
Wait a minute. You're saying Nocturna recruits children as young as that?
Put nothing beyond the depths of depravity that Nocturna is capable of. That young genocide was Cephtus. I guess it doesn't come as much of a surprise that he ascended to the rank of Warslayer. When they found your father, they dragged you both out of the hole, took you away, and forced Akio to his knees. Your mother had had enough of watching after that. Neither I nor any of the rebel soldiers we brought could stop her from charging. We had no choice but to back her up when she ran toward the horde, firing her laser cannon. Screaming and crying, she blasted her way through until she came face to face with Warslayer Yafu, the High Priestess's husband. It was a standoff with both sides caught in a frenzy of murderous anger. After the shooting stopped, there were only 3 of us left. Your mother, Gabriella, who was one of our best trained sharpshooters, and me. Maunia was standing behind Yafu with you in her arms. The rest of their legion zeroed in on us, blocking our chances of escape. All we had were our weapons and rage. Maunia handed you to the boy Cephtus, pulled a knife from her belt and put it to the neck of your father. I'll never forget the demonic look in her eyes or what she said before ending the stalemate, resulting in the chaos that came after. She gazed directly into your mother's eyes and said, "Behold, ultimate suffering," before slitting his throat. Tao screamed in a fury, firing her cannon at the legion surrounding us. Gabriella activated her shield, which protected us from the brunt of their firepower. Nevertheless, it was all in vain. The legion eventually overpowered us, but not before Tao was able to grab hold of Yafu. Without thinking twice, she pointed her cannon at the Warslayer's head and fired, killing him instantly. Your mother wanted Maunia to feel the same pain she felt. Genocidus tackled us, disarmed us, and forced us to our knees. We'd been defeated, and were at the mercy of the High Priestess. Maunia knew Nocturna wanted us alive, which made her pain that much more unbearable. She couldn't avenge the death of her husband, at least not at that moment. With the Warslayer dead, command fell to one of the head guardians. While Nocturna knew what Tao looked like, they never had any records of my appearance. The guardians pointed their weapons at my head and Gabriella's, trying to make us confess which one of us was the sister of Tao. Before your mother or I could say a word, Gabriella screamed that she was the one. Her loyalty was uncompromising. With what they thought was the total capture of the courting bloodline, they took you, your mother, and Gabriella prisoner. The head guardian commanded that I was to be buried alive. For 10 years, your mother and Gabriella suffered at the hands of those tyrants before they were killed. As far as Nocturna knows, you are the last of the courting bloodline. To them, I'm dead.
How were you able to survive being buried alive? I asked, still trying to process everything she told me.
General Roslow. He found me over a day later. I almost didn't make it. If it weren't for the waters of luminescence, I most likely wouldn't have survived. So now you know everything. Your mother didn't give you up. She fought to save you.
We tried to rescue her from those tyrants for 10 long years, but every attempt failed. Many men and women died as a result. That attack we led on the Prime Temple yesterday was the first and only time one of our assaults succeeded. That's why Roslo is so on edge. I don't know what to say. My composure was waning. The bombshell of information she just laid on me was overwhelming. For years, I'd cursed my family for abandoning me. How could I have allowed such foolishness to consume me for all those years? The temple had me brainwashed well. The High Priestess had me hating my mother. I suppose that was the only revenge she could take for the death of her husband. Still, I'd make her pay for killing my father. I'd make them all pay.
Dejin needs you now, Naya. The waters of luminescence can heal him with your help, said Sarsha.
How? I asked.
As I've told you, you're of the courting bloodline. You recall how I said the waters of luminescence helped me when Roslo found me barely alive, buried underground? I was able to use the waters to heal myself. You can use the same technique to restore Dejin to health.
Is that possible? I thought the waters were toxic when consumed.
Waters touched by the radiant glow have no evil intent. These waters derive their power from the moon's glow. Soon you will learn that everything in this world is governed by that blue sphere in the sky.
Wait, what are you trying to say?
I'm saying these waters aren't toxic. That's a lie to keep the masses subjugated. If people knew the power this water possessed, we could rise up and challenge the authority of Nocturnus.
I stood there gaping. What about that whole song and dance with that guy the day you abducted me? He believed that if he drank the waters, he'd die.
I was just trying to get you to drink the waters, Naya. I could have told you the truth, but you would have dismissed my words as lies just as you did everything else I told you that day.
But that man believed.
It was an act. He knew the truth about the waters. I was grateful he noticed the hints about my little deception and acted accordingly. Had you simply drunk the water, you would have seen the truth for yourself.
So you're saying...
Yes, these waters are harmless. You think those priestesses would pour toxic water on their subjects during the prime of life ritual?
I was speechless. Foolish wasn't a strong enough word to describe how I felt just then.
Come with me, Naya. Let's see to your companion Dejin. I'll show you how to use the water to heal him.
Every passing day, more lies the High Priestess fed me came to light. I sighed and followed Sarsha out. Dejin needed to be my focus as of now, and helping him heal was the least I could do. He'd saved me on more than one occasion, and the more I learned about this power coursing through me, the better. 3. The Ecstasy of Luminescence. Sarsha and I entered an adjacent corridor, which led to a steamy chamber teeming with tubs made of transparent blue crystal. The waters of luminescence filled each one of them. I watched as men and women bathed naked side by side as if it were the norm. It wasn't any surprise to me, however. With their limited supplies, constant fighting, and frequent running, they'd survive the best way they saw fit. But this was the first time I'd ever seen anyone bathe in these waters, let alone men and women together. It was something I'd have to get used to.
Come this way, Naya and Sarsha. Dejin is right over here,
a nude, soaking wet woman said, guiding us. Near the back of the cleansing conclave lay Dejin in a tub of his own, unconscious, saturated in the shiny blue liquid. He looked half dead, the poor man. He'd been through so many beatings. It was a miracle he was still sane. After we approached, I knelt and wiped his brow. His locks of hair were covering a portion of his face. Despite his bruises, I began to realize just how beautiful this man was. The more I'd gotten to know him and experienced tribulations alongside him, the more it pained me to see him suffer. I turned to Sarsha with watery eyes. What do I do? How do I heal him?
You know what to do, she said, smiling.
I gazed at her, confused. What do you mean? She took my hand and submerged it into Daejin's bathwater.
Concentrate, my niece. Dive deep into yourself. Let the moon's glow flow through you. We are of courting blood. Our ancestors still thrive within us. Bring it out, Naya. Bring it out, she whispered.
With deep, slow breaths, I closed my eyes, searching for that hidden power within myself. It was there. I could see it. White light emanating from the core of my being. I could feel the sensation arising from deep within me. It was as if my soul had left my body, and I was looking down on the three of us. Where had this power been hiding all these years? A sudden jolt shocked me back into myself, forcing me to inhale sharply, loudly. I opened my eyes to see his bathwater glowing, soaking itself into Daejin's wounds, healing him. The awareness of what just happened, coupled with the tingling feeling all over my skin, stunned me.
Naya,
Daejin said softly. The waters had completely healed his wounds. It was mesmerizing. Daejin, you're okay, I said tearfully. He sat upright in the tub and looked around just as surprised as I was.
Naya, where are we? Where's Roslo? Is he still here?
You needn't worry about him, said Sarsha.
Daejin gazed at his arms and chest, eyes wide.
My wounds, they're gone. How is this possible?
What Nocturnus has hidden for years is now revealed to you, Daejon. Naya healed you, said Sarsha.
I caressed his right cheek with the backs of my fingers, smiling. It brought me joy to see him alive and well. I'll do everything in my power to see to it that he stayed that way.
Where's the man who did this to me?
Daejin turned his head left and right, trying to find the general. You don't have to bother yourself with him, I said. He understands now who you are. He isn't a threat to you anymore. Daejin's right eye ticked.
You mistake my intent. Trust me when I say I'm the one who's a threat to him. I'm going to rip him apart the next time I see that moronic bastard.
I placed my hand on his brow. Please calm yourself. He's been dealt with. We have to focus on our next move. We can't be at war with each other. He gathered his wits, took a deep breath, and sat back in the tub. I knew Daejin was probably fed up with all the constant near-death situations we'd been in since we first escaped from the temple. And to be mistaken for his murderous brother, I could only imagine what that felt like.
Naya, when we were in that dungeon, I swear I heard a voice whose owner I thought had long passed. Why would that idiotic general think I was Cephtus when he's been dead for years?
Said Daejin. Sarsha and I stared at each other, utterly baffled.
What?
Asked Sarsha.
My brother died long ago. He perished trying to help my father escape the Prime Temple. While I know my brother did the bidding of Nocturnus and the Supreme Sovereign for years, he was still noble at heart. He...
Stop. Just stop, exclaimed Sarsha. She stood with her arms crossed, hovering over the tub. The fury in her eyes hadn't gone unnoticed by either of us. Daejin, who told you that your brother was dead? I asked.
I saw his body burned along with my father's outside the Prime Temple on the statue of Surrealism. Both bodies were skinned and mutilated. A war slayer discovered them before they could escape.
Sarsha bent over and gazed into Daejin's eyes.
Sorry to be the one to tell you this, but your killer brother is alive and well. Surely you heard his voice when we saved you.
Yes, I did hear a voice that sounded familiar, but that couldn't have been Cephtus. He died trying to save my father.
I caressed his forehead and sighed softly. Daejin, Your brother is alive. Not only that, but he's the one who tortured me, and we were confined. And I'm sorry to say this, but he's the war slayer who captured your father. Daejin grabbed the sides of the tub.
No, my brother is no war slayer,
he said defensively.
Whether you want to believe it or not, Cephas is a war slayer,
Sarsha snapped.
He's a murderous, genocidal, psychopathic serial killer who gets off on skinning people alive. That's who he is, and we've been hiding and running from him for years. If he had his way, we'd all be a decoration of corpses, scattered across the lawn of the Prime Temple. That's why General Roslo did what he did. It's a miracle Roslo didn't kill you on sight.
Distraught, Daejin looked forward without saying another word. Sarsha, please, there's no need to come at him like that. He's been a prisoner of Nocturnus and has suffered just as you have. We've all been kept in the dark, lied to, and tormented by this tyrannical sovereign. If things are to get any better, then we have to work together. She sighed, sitting on the floor next to the tub. You're right. I'm sorry, Daejin. I wish your father had told us that his sons were twins. You've done nothing wrong, and Roslo had no right to beat you like that.
So that voice I heard.
Yes, that was your brother, Cephas, I said. When he came to me in my cell, I thought he was you, but his sadistic voice and battle scars showed me otherwise. He told me that he was the one who killed your father. As he shared his story, he seemed to be enjoying it. To tell you the truth, Daejin, he scared me. Daejin bared his teeth, shaking his head.
He was the one!
Daejin shouted, right eye twitching. I gently grabbed his hand and caressed his forearm.
So many lies, so much deceit, so much bullshit,
he screamed. Everyone in the room flinched before turning their attention toward us. The pain in his heart must have been overwhelming. I could only imagine.
Everyone, please, let us give these two a moment alone,
Sarsha said to the few people who were still in the room with us. Each of them gathered their clothes and other belongings and exited the room, observing us intensely. Isn't that the daughter of Tao courting? She's the one, isn't she? I heard one of them murmur.
I'll leave you two here to relax. After you've rested, we'll talk about our plans to bring down the Nocturnus Pinnacle. Would you like for me to bring that food tray in here for you?
Asked Sarsha. No, that's all right. We'll eat after, I said. She nodded, then turned to leave.
Wait,
exclaimed Daejin. Sarsha stopped and glanced at us.
I promise you that I'll personally make my brother pay for what he's done. You have my word,
he proclaimed. Without speaking, Sarsha bowed and smiled before departing. Daejin, did you really not know that your brother was alive? I asked, still a little confused.
As you know, I've been in seclusion for many years. When I returned from the Blue Forest, Nocturna Intelligence deemed me unfit due to my father's betrayal. Explaining what I saw during my tests of pledges only further aroused their suspicion. When they found out I was leaving my room to help the people in the outcast lands, they made my confinement permanent. Your abduction by these rebels gave them a reason to release me. Of all the would-be guardians and priestess nominees who traveled to Mount Lai Hua for their test, I was the only one to encounter that monster in the Blue Forest. I suppose they believed me to be an expendable asset. But now that I know the truth about my brother, my determination to take down this fucking tyrannical regime has intensified. Knowing that my brother is a war slayer is just... it kills me, he said with sorrow written all over his face. I stood and removed my nightgown, then threw it to the floor. What are you doing?
He asked nervously. His gaze was glued to my nude body. Joining you, I whispered. He opened his legs to make room for me. The warm water seeped into my pores, infusing an almost orgasmic feeling all over my legs. Dajan took hold of my hand delicately as I sat in the tub across from him. I couldn't believe how pleasurable this water felt all over my body.
I never thought I'd see this day,
he said. I smiled. What do you mean?
The day where I find just a glimmer of hope and peace.
I submerged myself, allowing the water to soak my long black hair. Holding my breath, I opened my eyes to look upon Dajan's naked physique. The blue hue of the luminescence hid the majority of him, but under the water, I could observe somewhat clearer. It was a beautiful sight. I held my breath for as long as I could, but then Dajan dipped his hand under my chin. He lifted me to the surface, inhaling deeply. I blinked a few times and stared into his eyes. A single lock of his hair ran down the right side of his face, strengthening the beauty of his gray eyes. For that moment, all worries faded as the gentle touch of his hand on my face gave me comfort beyond anything I'd felt before. Whatever gods existed in this world, I was thankful they'd brought me this magnificent man.
Can I ask you something?
He said. Sure, I stuttered. His eyes never broke with mine. The sensation of butterflies in my belly was making me nervous. I'd never felt this way about anyone. The more trauma we endured together, the closer we grew.
How were you able to heal me?
I wiped the water from my face and sat up straight. I'm not sure how I did it. I just closed my eyes and concentrated. Remember when I told you that my aunt was one of the leaders of the resistance faction?
Yes, I remember.
Sarsha is my aunt. The woman who just left us. She's the one who instructed me in healing you. He gulped.
That rude woman is your aunt?
I smirked. I'm sure she didn't mean to be rude, Dajan. They've all been through a lot. Life as an insurgent must have hardened her.
I understand. First impressions aren't always the best judgment of people in this oppressive world. With the constant suffering from the fiery fist of the Supreme Sovereign, it's a miracle any of us are sane.
He rested his arms on the sides of the tub, sat back and closed his eyes. Dajan? I tried to keep my voice from cracking.
Yes, Naya?
He said, eyes still closed. Can I ask you a personal question? He laughed.
We're in a tub together naked. What could be more personal than this?
His carefree attitude did nothing to curb my apprehension about what I wanted to ask him. After all we'd been through, I didn't know why I was nervous in the first place. But that didn't matter now. This was probably the last time we'd have a moment to ourselves before the fighting started, and I wasn't going to let this opportunity pass.
Is there something bothering you?
He asked. My brow wrinkled. Yes, there is.
What is it?
You, Dajan. You're bothering me. He opened his eyes and sat up.
Me? What did I do?
I'm starting to think that your heart is as cold as the ice caves of Mount Cancusa. I allowed my annoyance to overcome my anxiety, just as I always had in situations where I believed I wasn't in control.
What are you talking about?
I shook my head. Nothing, Dajan. Just forget it, okay? He gazed at me, confused. I turned my back to him, crossing my arms over my chest.
If I did something wrong, tell me, he said.
If I have to tell you, then...
Tell me what?
He wrapped his arms around me, pulling my body into his warm, muscled chest.
I see what you're doing.
I didn't pull away from him. In fact, I relaxed in his arms, though I felt I was losing control again. What am I doing? I asked.
There's no need to behave defensively as a coping mechanism, Naya. My heart isn't cold. You're an inexperienced young woman which is why I've kept my distance. Besides, I'm a guardian. My duties are to protect, not procreate, he said.
Whatever titles we had during our time in the Prime Temple hold no meaning now. We're fugitives, you and I. You can tear down the barriers concealing your heart.
I will, the moment you do the same, he retorted.
I don't have any barriers.
Then face me.
Why? He sighed.
I swear, you're like a spoiled brat sometimes.
I turned to look at him, blood rushing to my face. How dare you! I exclaimed before he swiftly engaged his lips with mine. He squeezed me tighter in his arms, pressing our naked, wet bodies against one another. The smell of him hit me blissfully hard. This was the first time I'd ever tasted a man on my lips. I fell into him, giving in to my desire. Hugging my legs around his hard body, I pulled him tighter, closer. His fast-paced heartbeat thumped against my bosom. Cultivating this sensation was all that mattered at this moment. The rest of the world faded to oblivion, and all that existed was us. I felt Daejin pull away.
Look at me, Naya,
he whispered. I can't.
I beg you, look at me.
He caressed my chin with his thumb. I can't, Daejin. If I glance at you for even a second, my heart will explode. I've never felt this way about anyone before, and people like us can't afford such intense emotions, not in a world meant only for suffering.
We make our own path in this world. Neither pagans nor gods have a claim to our destiny. The gods of Yakulis are a fairy tale. The only course we are bound to is that of your courting bloodline. With that, we'll forge our own lives, our own path, our own love,
he whispered with erotic undertones. I still sat before him with my eyes closed. Fear of what my heart might do the moment I gazed into his beautiful gray eyes consumed me. I couldn't fall for him. Why love, only for it to be taken away? The same way my father had been taken from my mother.
Tell me when,
he whispered. When what?
When you will take down your barriers. I'm here before you now. I won't distance my emotions from you any longer. Embrace what's developing between us.
Why? What's the point of passion when it's fleeting? It can be ripped from us just as easily as our lives.
All that is worth having is also worth fighting for. We can't live our lives based on the uncertainty of the future. We must hold on to the present and construct our own route forward.
I don't want what happened to my parents to happen to us.
I can't promise you that. We don't have a dangerous road ahead of us. But what I can promise you is that as long as I live, I will never hurt you. All you have to do is open your eyes.
My heart sped at the thought of gazing at him after our kiss. His sweetness was still potent on my lips. I didn't want to fall. I didn't want tales of the past to become my present.
Trust in me,
he said softly.
We've been through enough to know that our bond will only grow deeper. Remember our promise.
I placed my wet hands on his cheeks and opened my eyes. At that moment, I fell. He was there. He was real. The kiss, the passion, the love I felt was real. He closed his eyes and kissed me once more. My tongue found its way into his mouth. He tasted like the honey of a swanberry. We embraced each other, hugging tighter, our kiss becoming more and more passionate. With his strong hands, he cupped my ass to position me in his lap. The feel of his length resting against my belly under the water made me moist. I couldn't believe this was going to happen.
I want you, Naya,
he whispered in my ear. Daejin, please, be gentle with me. I've never done this before, I said anxiously.
You needn't even ask,
he said. I grabbed a handful of his hair and pulled his head back, revealing his neck. Starting from the center of his chest, I licked my way up to his right cheek. My body hovered over his thick black cock. We stopped and stared into each other's eyes.
"Gently,"
he whispered. I did as he said, slowly lowering myself down on his throbbing manhood. The water illuminated light blue, as did my skin. Dajan gaped and moaned as I took every inch of him into me. My senses heightened. There was no pain or blood, only the pleasurable sensation of his pulsating cock deep inside me. Amelia always said the first time would be painful. I guess she was wrong.
"Naya, you're glowing,"
Dajan said, stunned. The water washed over me, increasing the level of pleasure I felt tenfold. That's when I knew the ecstasy of luminescence was the cause of painless deflowering. My legs shook around Dajan's body as he tightened his grip on my backside. His hands shivered at the warmth of my soaking walls on his cock.
I've never felt anything like this. Don't stop. Naya, faster, harder,"
he exclaimed. But I moaned in pleasure. I thought we were going to take it slow. I hugged him as tightly as I could.
Does it hurt? Am I hurting you?"
he asked.
"No, Dajan.
It feels good. It feels so fucking good," I exclaimed. He dug his nails into my ass, squeezing firmly. Up and down, he moved my body on his cock, his thrust deeper, more powerful. The water splashed over the edges of the tub. There were no more barriers between us. My body shone brighter, enveloping both of us in its radiance. The passion between us had brought out the magnificence of my courting blood. Feelings of love were soon palpating deep within my heart. The stronger that love, the more potent my power. I knew then what had been lost by history, what Nocturnus had tried to crush. I would reveal it to the world. I was beginning to believe what needed to be done.
"Naya, never let go of me. Never be apart from my arms,"
whispered Dajan. I held my head high into the air, gaping. Dajan began to suck on my breast as I extended my arms outward, round and round. His tongue twirled on my right nipple. I rode his cock faster and faster as bliss tingled on my skin. Water was splashing all over the place, which only served to feed the divine sensation of him deep inside me. I didn't want to stop. I never wanted this to end.
"This is nirvana, to make love to a courting,"
he said. I closed my eyes, swaying my body back and forth. Everything seemed to be moving in slow motion. Soon, weightlessness engulfed our bodies. My legs shivered with every penetration of his cock. I wanted him to go faster, deeper, harder.
"Look, we're floating,"
exclaimed Dajan. I opened my eyes to the shock of us hovering above the tub. The water broke off into an array of fist-sized droplets, drifting all around us. We clutched each other tightly so as not to sail away from one another.
"How is this possible?"
said Dajan. The glow of my body rotated between blue and white. It was almost as if I were becoming that entity I'd encountered in the blue forest. Higher into the air we ascended, taking in the euphoria of whatever powers I had hidden within me. Us was an unexplainable, unimaginable feeling of togetherness I'd never thought would be bestowed on me in this lifetime. Dajan slowly maneuvered our bodies until we spun around with him on top of me. Floating among the droplets, we continued to make love in mid-air. I wrapped my legs around him as he pushed his cock deep inside me. I didn't know how or why, but with every penetration, a shockwave of energy shot out of me, reverberating through the room like ripples on the ocean. I'd lost myself in the feeling. Dajan was right there with me, eyes affixed on mine. Our souls were one. All that he was in me. We were becoming each other. He sucked on my neck and continued to squeeze my ass as my walls dripped on his cock. Climax was near and my legs were shaking uncontrollably. I screamed as loud as I could each time he pushed himself deeper inside me. The sensation was so good, so overwhelming that I almost cried. I bit down on a lock of his hair to stop myself from screaming. Dajan's moans and pants fueled my desire for more. I wanted to feel his warm seed shoot into me. I'd never desired anything more in my entire life.
Keep your legs right there. Hold them up higher,
he said into my ear before continuing to suck on my neck. I was caught in a realm of euphoric bliss from which I was unable to escape. With one hand, he reached down between my legs and rubbed my clit with his wet fingers. I damned near died when he did that. Words had left me. All I could do was moan. I spat his hair out and screamed his name, begging him not to stop. The intervals between the shock waves shortened. We were covered in sweat from the heat of my aura. The temperature in the room grew so intense that the water began evaporating into steam. But that didn't matter. Despite all the crazy mystical things happening to me while we made love, the only concern Dajan had was with our embrace.
I want to feel you come on my cock. I need to feel your body twitch in orgasmic ecstasy,
he whispered. I was dripping all over him. Hearing him speak those words drove me to the brink.
Come on my cock, Naya. Come,
he repeated. I'm coming. I'm coming, I yelled out.
We'll come together. Tell me where you want my seed.
Fucking side me, I exclaimed, climaxing. We came together as he released his warm, manly liquid deep into my pussy. Incredible blue energy blasted out of my core, expanding in all directions. The shockwave hit the steam, crystallizing it instantly. The dust of ice dropped from the air, falling all over the place like glowing blue snow. Dajan and I descended slowly to the floor, our bodies shivering. The temperature in the room went from hot to cold in a matter of seconds. It was as if we were in an ice cave with magical scenery. As our bodies touched the floor, we gazed at each other and smiled. My legs fell from around his waist in exhaustion, still shivering. His panting breaths on my skin filled me with a delight I'd never experienced. In my heart, I vowed to keep him safe for as long as I was able. I grabbed the back of his head and pulled his mouth onto mine, then licked his lips and tongue. Who could have imagined my first time would be so magical?
You're mine now, Naya. Make me this promise, that you'll never abandon me under any circumstances. In your heart and between your legs is where I belong,
he said softly. I promise, Dajan. My barriers are broken. Nothing stands in the way of us anymore, I responded. He kissed my forehead and smiled at me with a sense of hope in his eyes. I knew then that we had to succeed in destroying the tyrannical rule of the Supreme Sovereign and bring down Nocturnus forever. It was the only way we'd be free to live in peace. I would not have us starve in the outcast lands or forever be on the run, fighting battles that yielded little to no progress toward our goal. We had to formulate a plan that would ensure their defeat. The only way we'd be victorious was for me to journey back into the Blue Forest, where I would meet Eve so she could explain to me how I'd be able to channel my powers against my enemies. At this point, I'd do anything it took to bring down Nocturnus and make that High Priestess bitch Maunia pay for taking my parents from me. They'd all pay.
Naya, are you all right? You've been staring into space for a minute now. What are you thinking?
Asked Dajan. I turned my gaze to him and brushed the locks of hair away from his face. Words couldn't describe what I felt for him. I was just thinking about us, about our future. I was thinking about the Blue Forest. Dajan rolled off me with a concerned expression.
The Blue Forest? You're still thinking of going back there?
Of course. We talked about this before, remember? He sighed.
Well, I was hoping, since we joined with the resistance, that you changed your mind about that.
Look around us. You saw what happened while we were making love. I have to learn how to use these powers. The only way I'm going to control them is if I consult with Eve.
You mean that monster that tried to kill me during my tests of pledges?
I rubbed his arms. Daejin, please. We've been through this already. I have to go into the Blue Forest. I don't have a choice in the matter.
There's always a choice,
he said, turning his gaze away. I softly grabbed his head and turned it to face me so I could look into his eyes. Not in this. My going there is only a stepping stone to a greater path toward peace. He brashly exhaled while overlapping his hands on top of mine.
I guess I don't have a choice either. I'm going with you. Where you go, so too will I, he said.
I smiled and kissed him between the eyes. The shards of ice began to melt, turning back into luminescence waters. I lay on the floor, pulling Daejin's head onto my belly. We had a dangerous journey ahead of us, and I wanted to savor this moment for as long as possible. Soon my aunt and Roslo would want to have words with us. Until then, I'd find comfort in the arms of the man who risked his life on many occasions to save mine. In Daejin's arms was where I wanted to be, nowhere else. "4. Strategy.
You must have lost your ever-loving mind if you think I'm going to let you go back there,"
exclaimed Sarsha. I'm not asking for permission, I sneered. Daejin approached from behind, placing his hands on my shoulders.
It's too dangerous,
said Roslo.
According to the intelligence we gathered at the Prime Temple, the Apex Parliament passed an edict ordering the outlands of the Blue Forest to be guarded at all times. All tests of pledges have been suspended. There's no way in or out without them knowing.
Daejin stared daggers at the general.
I think we've had enough help and advice from you for one day, Roslo. Don't think for a second that you're off the hook for what you did to me.
The general pierced his gaze at Daejin.
Oh, you mean saving your life from those murderous bastards? No, I mean beating me within an inch of mine, shouted Daejin, brushing me aside. You two, please stop this, said Sarsha. What's done is done, and there's no changing the past. We must somehow get to the sky resistance near the Red Lakes of Cantoon. We're going to need reinforcements if Nocturnus decides to rain fire on Mount Laiwa. There are children and families here. I won't risk their lives. Drawing Nocturnus' attention far away from this place is our main priority. My eyes widened. Wait. You're telling me we're at Mount Laiwa? We're actually under the mountain. These underground caves were built decades ago as a sanctuary for those whom this authoritarian regime could not rule. Our enemies believe the only way to get here is through the Blue Forest. But there are underground tunnels that lead beneath Mount Laiwa, 2 miles from the surface. Our courting ancestors constructed this place during the genocidal wars that almost drove us into extinction. We're protected from airstrikes here. But over the years, this regime has developed weapons that could reach us no matter how deep in the earth we are. The location of this place must remain secret. I'm sorry, Naya, but we can't risk you going back to the Blue Forest and being captured again. There are too many lives at stake, she said. A crowd of people began to converge around the 4 of us. The looks on their faces gave me pause. The children, with their war-weary eyes, affected me the most. I could be them. Had my parents not sacrificed themselves, I too could have been brought up in a world of piss and shit. Instead, I'd lived comfortably in the bosom of our enemies. The only way I could curb this suffering was if I made it back to Eve in the damned forest. I would see this world reborn by any means necessary. So let me get this straight, said Daejin. You've been here this entire time in the safety of these caves, while people starve to death in the outcast lands? Do you have any idea the number of children I watched die out there? Why haven't you done anything? Why didn't you protect them?
The crowd began to murmur amongst themselves as I held Dajan back from confronting Roslo.
Sacrifices must be made,
said the general.
Sacrifices? What in the hell is that supposed to mean?
I bellowed. We can't save everyone, said Sarsha. Our resources are limited. If we let everyone in, our food supplies would dwindle to nothing within months. We save who we can.
So the majority are left to die while the few live under the protection of a general who tortures his captives? Is that it?
Dajan sidestepped me and came face to face with the general.
Understand this, Dajan. If you wish to save the whole damn world, then I suggest you put aside past wrongs and work with us to bring down this damn regime. I rarely apologize for my actions, but know that I do regret what I did to you. Decades of battle have blurred the lines between right and wrong for me. I'm not going to lie to you. We need your help as well as Naya's. If Cephas is your brother, then we'll need you to help lure him out into the open. He's killing our people. He must be stopped.
The crowd got on their knees and bowed to us. Please help us. Please save us. Deliver us. Stop this massacre, they said tearfully. I squatted by one of the little girls, raised her head, and swiped her tears away with my thumbs. You needn't cry, little one. Your suffering will soon come to an end. My eyes are wide open. I'll do everything in my power to ensure not one of you goes hungry again. Is it true? Are you the daughter of Tau Courting, the one who will destroy the unjust gods of Yakulis and set us free? Said the girl. I looked to Sarsha for affirmation of what this child was saying. What had my aunt been telling these people? Please say you're the prophesized one. The pagan god Surrealism is a dark shadow over this world. The gods that Noc Pinna worship want to kill us all. Tell us that you're the one, please, cried the child. I rubbed the top of her soft head, smiling. You have my word, I whispered. The child leaped into my arms, hugged me tightly, and burst into tears. I gazed at the rest of the crowd. The desperation in their eyes was screaming to me. It was almost as if I could sense their misery, the heartache and mental torment they must have endured all their lives made me want to shed tears of my own. I released the child and stood upright. Roslo and Sarsha were staring at me as if I were the answer to all their ills. I wasn't sure what I was, but one thing I knew for sure. I alone had the power to end this oppressive institution of horror. And the key to that power was in the Blue Forest.
So will you join us?
Asked Roslo. I gazed around the room with optimism. As I've said, you have my word. A cheerful murmur from the crowd began to echo through the caves. I was happy for it. Anything I could do to raise their hopes would be welcomed.
How do you plan to get to the Sky Resistance? Said Dajan. Cantoon is on the other side of the continent to the south. With Noc Pinna on high alert, you'll need the gods to descend from the heavens and ferry you there. Since our stealth communications have been jammed and all other channels are being monitored by Nocturna intelligence, we'll have no choice but to send a runner, said Roslo.
Dajan chuckled loudly.
A runner? Are you nuts? It'll take them weeks, if not months, to get there on foot. Even if they somehow make it to Cantoon without being captured or killed, they'll have another long and dangerous journey on the way back. As I've told you, our resources are limited. We have no other means of communicating with them. Then how do you even know if they still exist? For all you know, they've been destroyed, argued Dajan. I know they're still there. They have to be.
Dajan exhaled heavily.
Your description for victory is going to lead many of your people to pointless deaths. We don't have time to wait months. We don't even have days to spare. I've been fighting this war for decades.
Now that we've attacked the Prime Temple, the best thing we can do is lie low. Sending a runner to Cantoon will give us the time we need to consolidate our resources and wait them out. Right now, Nocturnus has probably had the War Ministry dispatch every war slayer on the planet to look for us. Victory isn't my only priority, Guardian. My sole responsibility is the survival of my people. Daejin stepped directly into the General's face.
Is that Guardian remark supposed to be an insult?
Questioned Daejin with fire in his eyes.
Take it how you want, Guardian,
Roslo sneered. I stepped in between them and pushed them apart. I agree with Daejin. Cephas will never stop hunting us after what happened at the Prime Temple. The High Priestess especially won't stop now that she no longer has to hide her hatred for me. Waiting here is equivalent to waiting for death. If we want to increase our forces, we have to gather people from the outcast lands. If they're still alive, the Sky Resistance is just too damn far away to be of any use to us. Besides, when was the last time any of you had contact with them?
Sarsha sighed. We haven't had any contact with them in...
Sarsha!
Shouted Roslo. Open your eyes, General. No one's heard from the Sky Resistance in years. For all we know, they're probably all dead, just like the Blue Rights Resistance. We're probably all that's left, she bellowed.
No, I don't believe that. We can't be all that's left. I refuse to believe that.
Gloom washed over the people's faces as they stared at the General. Perhaps we should finish this discussion in private, I suggested. The last thing these people needed was more damning information on their prospects of survival. The bickering of their leadership would only serve to erase whatever hope my presence here gave them. Sarsha nodded and looked to Roslo, who teemed with anxiety over the thought of being the last Resistance faction.
We can continue this conversation in my quarters. General,
she said to snap him out of his downward gaze.
Yes, of course, this way,
he said humbly. The crowd parted to make room for us to leave. Their expressions were more worried than before. They'd have reason to smile soon enough. That I'd make sure of. We trekked down a long corridor to a large red room filled with candles. As I stared at my surroundings, the wonderment of this place had me in awe. The fact that my ancestors built this haven fascinated me. There was so much about my past that I wanted to know. Before I left for the Blue Forest, I'd have to sit down with my aunt so she could tell me everything there was to know about my mother and our family.
You can sit here,
said Sarsha, guiding us toward a rectangular table made of grayish-white stone. The chairs were without armrests and shared the same design and stone material. Roslo sat at the head of the table with an irritated look in his eyes as Sarsha sat at the other end, gazing at both Daejin and me.
You listen to me and listen well. Don't ever put hopelessness into the hearts of my people again,
Roslo sneered. What are you talking about? I asked, trying to hide my growing annoyance.
The only hope those people out there have is the belief that there are multiple factions of resistance all over the globe, ready and waiting for the order to overthrow the Supreme Sovereign and his Nocturnus regime, an act which will finally bring peace to their lives. Putting in their heads that we're the only faction left will devastate them, he continued.
Daejin sat next to me on the right side of the table, tying his dreads behind his head. Lying to your people will only hurt them in the long run, I said.
No lies have been told. We don't know if we're the last of the resistance, Naya,
said Sarsha.
Yes, but clinging to false hope isn't going to win this war, said Daejin. We are outnumbered, outmatched, and at a technological disadvantage. A head-on battle with the armies of the War Ministry is suicide. The only way to victory, true victory, is to eliminate the Supreme Sovereign himself.
Roslo burst out laughing.
Yes, and after we pull off that miracle, I think I'll go and fart diamonds out of my ass,
he said before laughing even harder. Daejin scoffed.
No wonder you're losing this struggle. You joke in the face of what needs to be done to secure success.
What was that? Roslo jumped to his feet.
Sit down, General, said Sarsha. What he proposes isn't without merit. For decades we've survived by running and hiding. I don't know about you, but I've had enough. As far as I'm concerned, we either kill those responsible for our suffering or die in the attempt.
Roslo took his seat.
Excuse me? I'm done, General Roslo. I'm sick of running. I'm sick of hiding. These people have killed everyone I've ever loved. I absolutely fucking refuse to sit here on my ass and wait for a runner to travel to the other side of the continent only to tell us months later that the Sky Resistance is a thing of memory. It's all or nothing now. I will only accept peace or death. Nothing in between. Sarsha, you can't be serious,
Roslo stuttered.
I've never been more serious. Now that my niece is here, nothing is stopping us from at least trying to bring down these fucks. If the brother of Seftus says the only path to victory is with the death of the Supreme Sovereign, then damn it, let's do it!
Roslo stared at my aunt in disbelief. The fretfulness on his face was telling. It seemed as if he wanted this to continue to drag on.
Sarsha, you're letting confidence in your niece overcome your better judgment. Now is the time to survive, not bring a full-on war to the doorstep of the temple.
But isn't that what we just did? I interjected. You invaded the Prime Temple and killed Guardians. The war is here, whether you want it or not. And the longer we sit here arguing about it, the more danger we're putting these people in. Dejen leaned forward, placing his hands on the table.
Why are you so hesitant, General? Don't you want to see an end to all this misery?
I could hear him gritting his teeth.
Of course I do, but at what cost? Our lives, if necessary, Roslo, our lives,
Sarsha said sternly. The general leaned back in his chair with a brutish expression and crossed his arms. I could already tell what he was about to say.
I'm sorry, Commander Sarsha, but I have to think about the lives of everyone, not just you or me. I forbid you from taking any action against the Supreme Sovereign, Noc Penna, or anyone until we know for certain the resistance in Cantoon is with us. I'll send a runner in the morning. End of discussion.
Dejen slammed his fist on the table.
You coward!
I squeezed Dejen's shoulder to keep him from getting in the general's face again.
That's final,
Roslo exclaimed with a hint of a half-smile. I wasn't sure if Dejen or Sarsha caught it, but I sure as hell did. Just then I knew something was off about this whole thing. Waiting months here would mean assured death. From the brief time I'd been in the presence of Seftus, I could see that he'd stop at nothing until we were all dead. Following the commands of this man was something I had no intention of doing.
You two can make yourselves at home. Rest or eat if you need to. Just know that any action against Noc Penna without my go-ahead will be a direct action against the courting resistance. My resistance. Now, Sarsha, if you will explain our plans to everyone while I map out a path to Cantoon for our runner,
he said matter-of-factly. My aunt balled her fists. The annoyance on her face mirrored Dejen's and mine.
Are you going to just sit there and let him decide our fates?
Dejen said to Sarsha.
I'm in charge. Our command structure is what keeps us alive. Tau granted me second-in-command status for a reason, said Roslo.
My aunt squinted in anger.
My sister granted you nothing. You took dominion of the courting resistance after her abduction. And for 20 years, you never challenged that fact. Why do so now? Maybe because you're being irrationally stupid, shouted Dejen.
The general chuckled.
The continuation of this discussion is redundant. I've made my decision. Now, if you will excuse me, I have a route to plan.
Roslo stood, pushed his chair in and left the room with a smug, elitist look plastered on his face. I wanted to punch him right then and there. Daejin shook his head and sighed.
Sarsha, while I'm grateful to you and your people for going to the Prime Temple to save us, I won't sit here on my hands and wait for an army of genocidists to storm this place and kill us.
I held Daejin's hand and gazed at my aunt. Nor will I. Sarsha returned our stares with defiance in her eyes.
Don't worry. You won't.
5. Courting Bloodlines.
Down here, quickly,
said Sarsha. We entered a moist black chamber that smelled of corrosion. It was so dark I could barely see in front of myself. This underground fortress had so many different caves and corridors, it was difficult to keep track of them all. My aunt lit a torch, illuminating the path before us. As the darkness faded, I observed the light reflecting off the blue crystal walls. The ceiling appeared as if large droplets of water had been suspended in time. I couldn't tell if it was ice or water that defied the laws of gravity. Either way, it looked enchanting.
Where are you taking us?
asked Daejin. Sarsha, without looking back to acknowledge his question, continued to press on. The three of us crossed the threshold of a massive area where the foul scent faded, replaced by pure, fresh air. Up against the back wall stood an enormous statue that mimicked my person. Made of what seemed to be diamond, the fully nude figurine goddess towered over the room. Whoever constructed this monument must have been an artistic genius. "What is this place?" I asked in awe.
"According to our history, this is the birthplace of our lineage. No one knows of this place, not even Roslo," she said.
As we journeyed deeper into the cave, I felt an increasing power penetrate my pores. The air itself gave off a euphoric sensation that heightened my need to be touched. We came upon a stone bridge built over a pool of shining blue water that didn't quite appear to be of the luminescence, but rather something else. It was as if this liquid were much more potent than I was used to seeing. Sarsha and I approached the bridge with Daejin not far behind.
"I'm sorry, Daejin, but this is as far as you go," said Sarsha before tossing her torch into the pond.
The flame illuminated the room purple upon touching the water, then fizzled out. "What do you mean?" I asked, clutching Daejin's arm.
"What's beyond this bridge is meant for your eyes only, Naya. You wanted to know our history, didn't you?"
Daejin and I gazed at each other. "And what purpose does Daejin not joining us serve? I'm not sure if you noticed, but he and I are a team."
"You'll be safe with me. It'll only take a few minutes. Please, just trust me," Sarsha pressed.
Daejin ran his fingers through my hair, kissed me between the eyes, and smiled.
"It's okay, Naya. I'll just wait out here. You and Sarsha go do your thing."
Sarsha held her hand out, waiting for me to take it. "All right, don't wander off anywhere," I said.
Daejin looked around and smiled. "Trust me, I have nowhere else to go."
The carefree tone of his voice filled me with warmth. How could he be so positive after everything we'd been through? His optimism amazed me.
"This way, Naya,"
Sarsha said. Daejin sat by the steps of the bridge and dipped his hands into the pond. As Sarsha and I crossed the bridge toward the statue, a tingling sensation prickled all over my skin. Although it wasn't painful, it did feel as if someone inside this statue was calling to me. I looked up and gazed in awe at the monument. I still couldn't believe my ancestors built this.
"For thousands of years, the entrance to this shrine has been closed to us. I tried, your mother tried, your grandmother tried. Just about everyone in our family dating back before the Great War tried to open this shrine. If you are who I believe you to be, then all of us are saved."
Sarsha removed a light pink cloth hanging from a small portion of the statue. Imprinted on the statue was a molding of a handprint that glowed white and blue. "What is that?" I asked. She smiled. "Your destiny. Place your hand on the day and see this shrine open." I stared at the molding with apprehension. "This is the reason you brought me down here? Just to open some shrine for you?" I questioned suspiciously. "It isn't just for me, Naya. It's for all of us. Within this shrine could be the answer we've been searching for. I've put all my hopes into this. Please just put your hand on the key." "You've tried to open this before, right? What's going to happen when I put my hand on it?" "Would you like a demonstration?" With haste, she placed her hand on the molding. The glow emanating from it turned from blue to red before volts of electricity shot from it, giving Sarsha a small shock. "Ah!" she exclaimed, pulling her hand back. "Do you see? It won't accept me." I gazed at her with even more uneasiness than before. "Why won't it accept you? You're of courting blood, aren't you?" "It takes more than being of courting blood." She nursed her hand and glanced away. My suspicions grew even more considerably. "There's something you're not telling me." I squinted at her and crossed my arms. Just put your hand on the key," she said exhaustedly. "Not until you tell me the truth. Are you really my aunt?" "Yes, we are of the same bloodline." "Then why can't you open this shrine? And why does this statue look exactly like me? I want answers, or I'm going right back over the bridge to Dejen." She shook her head. "Before the gods, I swear you are as stubborn as your mother was." I continued to stand there waiting for an explanation. Sarsha gazed at me anxiously. She was hiding something, and I would refuse to put my hand on that thing until I knew the truth. "Naya, we believe you to be the genetic reemergence of the Empress Tui courting, the mother of us all," she said. "Who?" I stared at her with a wrinkled brow. "Since you were raised in the Prime Temple, it's no surprise that you know nothing of the history of our people. Empress Tui ruled our world for centuries before the position of Supreme Sovereign was established. She was a goddess, an immortal being descended from the moon's glow, but she was betrayed by her Prime Minister, Sunulus Yakulis." "Wait, you mean Sunulus, the figurehead god of the gods of Yakulis?" I asked, dumbfounded. Sarsha snickered. "Sunulus was no god. He was but a man who sought power and control. Sunulus and his two brothers, Ahriman and Zahak, corrupted a batch of the waters of luminescence. The three of them used it to murder Empress Tui courting and establish themselves as the new gods. With the death of our ancestor, the moon's glow faded, covering our world in a dark shadow of death and destruction. Sunulus could wield the powers hidden within the waters of luminescence that granted Empress Tui her immortality. By the time Sunulus and his brothers died, though, they'd convinced the world that they, the gods of Yakulis, were to be worshipped faithfully without question. They founded the authoritarian Nocturnus Pinnacle regime and appointed a supreme sovereign to oversee it. That's the truth, Naya." I gaped. "Why didn't you tell me this before?" She finished nursing her hand and approached me. "The first time I told you the truth about our bloodline, you dismissed it as a lie. What reason would I have to think you'd believe me about this?" I gazed at the glowing key. "So you think our ancestor and I are one and the same?" "Well, you did wonder why this statue looks exactly like you. What other reason could there be?" I stood there and let it all sink in. Everything she said made perfect sense. This was the reason those bastards at the temple wanted to harvest me. Whatever questions I had about my place in all this had finally been answered. I was the genetic reemergence of my ancestor, Empress Tui Courting.
I understand if you're shocked, Naya. It isn't every day that you find out you're here to save the world, said Sarsha.
My hands were shaking. I didn't know how to react. My parents died to see me at this moment, here at this monument. I gazed back and forth between my aunt and the molding. What'll happen when I put my hand on this key? I asked.
Only the gods know. Empress Tui built this place with her own hands. I believe that once you open this shrine, her power will be infused in you, giving you the necessary gifts to take down Nocturnus for good.
And if it doesn't?
The worst that will happen is the key will turn red and give you a minuscule electric shock, she assured me.
Great. Looking forward to it, I said. Sarsha moved aside, allowing me to approach the hand-shaped mold. Slowly, I extended my right hand toward the mold and prepared myself to be electrocuted. With my eyes closed, I clenched my teeth and pressed my hand into the key. The entirety of the massive statue brightened in a white glow the moment my skin touched it. A blue flame ignited around my hand and soon consumed my whole body. Euphoria engulfed me.
The reincarnation of Empress Tui Courting has come. The gates shall be opened,
said the statue in an echoing angel-like voice. The flames around my body dissipated. Massive doors made of black glass appeared before us. I gazed at Sarsha, whose jaw was wide open. A shockwave of energy hit both of us as the doors opened gradually.
You may enter.
6. Apep's Tomb. A blue shield of energy surrounded the inside of the crystal room like a fortress. Sarsha stood back in reverence as beams of white light flared left to right from above.
Only that which is genetically pure can be granted access to this domain, said a mystical voice.
The barrier of energy blocked Sarsha from moving farther. I, however, passed through without any obstruction.
Naya,
said Sarsha, pounding her fist on the barrier. I gazed back at her with a hint of regret. As much as I wanted to go back to her, something inside my heart refused to let me.
No, I've waited my whole life for this moment. I will not be denied this, she bellowed. Beyond these walls is for Naya's eyes only, the voice said.
I watched as Sarsha placed her hands on the force field and stared at me with tearful eyes. Don't worry, I'll let you know everything that happens, I said. Sarsha dropped to her knees as the glass doors closed in front of her. The lights inside the room brightened to the extent where they were almost blinding. Where had she led me? Was this my destiny? You came here expecting gold, only to find lead, hissed a malevolent yet familiar voice. The lights dimmed until the room went completely dark. Whispers of tormented souls echoed all around me. What the hell was this? The Underverse beckons. You will fail just as your ancestors have, said the voice. A flash of green light originating from the center of the room illuminated everything. I shielded my eyes and breathed in the smell of rot that accompanied a cloud of smoke. I'd unwittingly entered my own doom. A dark portal opened in front of me, and out slithered the serpent Apep. The Lord of Chaos lay in wait at my feet to finish me off, and I was helpless to stop him. Do you truly believe yourself to be the one who will liberate your world from darkness? Apep chuckled. The serpent slowly transformed into human form. He donned a hooded black robe that covered his body from head to toe. He had the appearance of a lunar monk, poor and unclean. Stay away from me, I said, cautiously taking a few steps back. Apep reached toward me with a malicious grin. Do you fear me? The snake asked. My hands shook with nerves. You are the embodiment of chaos. I don't understand what you want from me. I'm nothing to you, I said. Apep nodded. That's true, my dear human. I am the embodiment of chaos. The humanoid snake's body became transparent, shifting in and out of focus. It was as if he were moving, yet remained still. Why are you here? Are you going to trick me into eating one of your maggot apples again? I asked. Apep laughed, which echoed loudly in what would become my tomb if I didn't find a way to escape. That apple and your release from the temple were only a pretext to lead you here. I've been planning this since before your grandparents' births. I stood there, utterly shocked. What do you mean? You're as defiant as Tui. You truly are her genetic reincarnation. She was a powerful, strong-willed woman. It's a shame she fell prey to the greed and ambition of treacherous humans. Despite my many efforts to tempt her, she never yielded. Unwavering was her will. Unmatched was her strength. Apep began to glow neon green, forcing my heart to beat fast with anxiety. You tempted my ancestor? I asked. Many times. It was she who confined me to this prison. Tui courting was to be the human within the rule of 3. But that was never meant to be. Now that you've released me from my imprisonment, there will never be one, Apep said tauntingly. Released you? I stuttered. Yes. The power you wield will become mine. I am the Lord of Chaos. Stopping the rule of 3 from coming into being for another few thousand years would spark chaos the cosmos has never seen. The snake exclaimed happily. Wait, what is this rule of 3? I asked, scared out of my wits. Something you will never see. The beast morphed back into a snake and grew in size, all the while laughing fanatically, as if he were already victorious. Why do you think I released you from your bondage in that rotting cesspool of shit you call a temple? Why do you think I presented you with that apple? I knew that as rebellious and determined as you are, you'd never take my offer. Your curiosity and need for power, coupled with your aunt's desperation for victory, have cleared the path for my escape. We now switch places, my dear human. You think your world is soaked in misery now? Wait until I whisper in the ears of those in power, tempting them to embrace their evil and chaotic impulses.
With you trapped here, there won't be another genetic reemergence for thousands upon thousands of years. Oh, yes. The Vampyre and the Seraph sent me here to test you so that you would prove your worthiness. They should have known I'd do so much more than that. 'Tis my nature.
I shook my head in disbelief. How did you help me escape from the temple if you're imprisoned here? It's not possible. Apep hovered above me, with fumes of rotting flesh hitting my nose excruciatingly hard.
You know so little. Your ancestor built this tomb. I've always been with you, waiting patiently for my chance to tempt you. The day you were born was one of the most joyous days of my existence. The connection will always be constant between the prisoner and the warden. While encased within these walls, I can only interact with the one who entrapped me. Or in your case, the genetic reemergence. Now that I'm freed, I will wreak havoc on this world, and you can sit here and ponder the knowledge that you're the one responsible for it.
The treacherous, demonic bastard continued to laugh and hiss, spitting his acid-green saliva all over the place. I dodged the droplets to keep from getting burned. This disgusting serpent! I would not be trapped here. My anger began to overpower my fear. Apep's constant laughter only served to fuel my fury, and thus my power. I gazed at my shaking hands, my right glowing white, my left glowing blue. I could feel the energy coursing through me. I would not be a slave to this fiendish trickster. My world was in shambles. People all over the globe suffered needlessly. And now he, the Lord of Chaos, wanted to make it even worse. I wouldn't allow it. I'd never allow that.
Ha 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 ha! Huh?
Apep ceased his laughter and gawked at me, stunned. My entire body was engulfed in white flame, overlapped with a blue aura. Electric currents shot from my hands, hitting and ricocheting off the walls aimlessly.
No! How did you? No!
Exclaimed the serpent. I didn't travel all this way to unleash more hell upon this world. I'll be damned if you escape this place, I shouted. An instinctual sense overcame me as if my body was being controlled by someone else. I can find you here once, and I'll do it a second time, I said with an echo. My voice sounded like two people speaking as one. Tui courting, my ancestor, was here with me. I could feel her.
This wasn't supposed to happen. You can't rob me of my fate, Tui!
Bellowed Apep. Your fate rests within these walls, I said. A massive orb of energy surrounded the snake's floating body.
No! Damn you!
He continued to scream. The orb shrank smaller and smaller until it was the size of a marble. The portal reappeared, and I tossed the tiny orb back into oblivion. The smell of rot faded, as did the green light. The room soon filled with shining white light and sweet scents. Serenity overwhelmed my soul as I fell to the floor, dizzy. Breathing heavily, I blinked twice, sprawling my limbs outward. Between rage and tranquility lies your most powerful weapon. Use it to free yourself and those you love from the horrors of this world, someone said. I gazed upward and saw a transparent figure of myself, glowing light blue. I jumped to my knees and crawled backward. Do not be alarmed, the figure said. I gazed closer and realized who it was. Are you? Yes, Naya. I am your ancestor, Empress Tui Korti, she said softly. I stood and approached her carefully. She appeared as a translucent ghost, the same as Eve in the blue forest. It amazed me how identical we were. The energy emanating from her astounded me. Goosebumps formed all over my skin the closer she came to me. 2,000 years of lies will come to an end by your hand, my descended. You will succeed where I have failed. I trust in you. You will take the power of the moon's glow into yourself so that my soul can be freed. Tui reached toward my bosom, her palm warm with light. An otherworldly love and compassion filled every particle of my being. With a single touch from her, I felt what could only be described as climax, as if I were a pond being hit by raindrops. My chest rippled with her caress. I saw it all our history, the days of her rule, those who betrayed her. Peace extended to every mile of this beautiful blue sphere. It was a world I'd never known could exist. My descendant, the power now rests with you. Erase the lies this society was built upon and restore Earth to its former glory that is more peaceful, caring, and loving. Bring about change so that all will prosper. She whispered with the voice of the goddess, my loving ancestor. We were one and the same. She was us, and I was we. I leave it to you now. I must journey beyond this realm. In your hands rests the fate of everyone. Free them, Naya. Free them, she said. Her ghostly image began to dematerialize. Wait, what about Apep? Is he gone for good? And what about this rule of 3 he spoke of? But it was too late. What remained of her shattered into glowing white dust. She soon faded into nothing. The aura surrounding my body dimmed, and the glass doors before me reopened. I gazed at Sarsha, who shot to her feet the moment she laid eyes on me. The force field that kept her from entering was gone. "Naya!" she shouted, running into the room. "Auntie," I said with a smile. I hugged her gently with a renewed sense of hope. I understood now. I knew what needed to be done. Nothing would stop me from going back to the blue forest. No being would be powerful enough to. "Naya, tell me what happened. What did you see?" she asked. I ran my fingers through her hair, smiling. "The future, Auntie Sarsha. I saw the future."